The emotional entanglement between a bankrupt 28-year-old youth traveling alone and his ex-girlfriend who constantly demands repayment, a beautiful and aloof second-generation wealthy woman, a female owner of a Western restaurant in Dali, and a female student who travels around China carrying a drawing board. When the love of the tide completely fades, is everything left behind hypocritical or true? My name is Jiang Zhan, and this is my story. Chapter 1. Bankruptcy. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The rain outside the window pattered for 3 consecutive days, and I stood in the corner quietly watching the last computer move out of the company, watching my years of hard work go to waste. Yes, I went bankrupt in the city of Suzhou. People often say that I am not confused at 30, but on my 28th birthday, I completely fell into a state of confusion and doubt, unable to extricate myself. Mr. Jiang, shall we leave first? I nodded. But suddenly I saw one of the girls struggling for a long time and speaking up. Mr. Jiang, you are a good boss. If one day you make a comeback, I will come back. I never expected that in the end, these 3 interns recruited a few months ago would comfort me looking at the vast yet empty company. I lowered my head and lit a cigarette, then shook my head with a bitter smile and left. Walking alone on the streets of this city, the lights were bright and the traffic was bustling, but it didn't give me any peace. I wanted to escape even more. Dedicated your youth to this brilliant city behind you. Unconsciously, I walked to the moat and saw a group of young people singing loudly around, with passionate expressions on their faces, much like when I was 18 years old. Away from the crowd, I once again wandered alone in the corridor by the moat when suddenly my phone rang. It was my girlfriend Ling who called. Ling is an authentic Suzhou girl, gentle and considerate. The most irresistible thing for me is the passion with her every night. Her body and skills always make me a complete failure. Her body is a golden ratio, perfect for both the front and side of a girl. 2 days ago, I confessed to her about the company's difficulties and also admitted that I respect all of her choices. Hello, Ku. I answered the phone and fell silent for a moment. Jiang Zhan, let's break up. Even though I was mentally prepared, when I heard this sentence, there was still a suffocating feeling in my heart. I opened my mouth, but couldn't say a word. It took me a long time to softly say hello. But Ling Ku's next sentence completely confused me. I need you to repay the money I've lent you over the years. I've calculated it and it's around 600,000 yuan. I asked incredulously. Me. Give you back the money. 600,000. Over the years, when I've been with Ling Ku, I've basically paid for everything we eat and drink, and I also transfer 20,000 yuan in pocket money to her every month. How could I owe her money? Yes, 600,000, my youth loss fee. When I heard these words, the immense pain in my heart was no less than the feeling when the company collapsed. Upon hearing that I was silent, Ling Ku spoke again, her tone even colder. Don't tell me you don't have any money anymore. I know you still have this house in Suzhou with a market value of approximately 1.6 million yuan. When Ling Ku's words came to my mind, I finally understood that this was her true face. Previously gentle, she was just a well-disguised scammer. Sure, 600,000, I'll give it to you. I let out a deep sigh and agreed to this condition, and then the phone was instantly hung up. And I sat weakly on the nearby bench. I increasingly feel that my vision is just as good as my abilities, not much better. Entering the night, the number of people in the moat increased. Many men and women were on the guardrail, constantly carving something on the ground. It wasn't until they left that I could see it clearly. It seems to be a few names. Jian Wei, Zhaoyang, Mi Kai. I suddenly had some doubts. What does this mean? Why do so many young people paint these people's names by the moat? Or are these people carrying some of their emotions? I couldn't figure it out, but following the principle of not thinking if I couldn't figure it out, I took out a cigarette from my pocket and lit it, and the smoke slowly rose. The streetlights flickered, and my thoughts drifted back 10 years. In 2014, I rode a motorcycle alone and traveled throughout China. Today, 10 years later, I want to continue my journey. I can go anywhere, as long as I'm not in Suzhou. Returning to the house, pushing open the door, the room became quite empty. Perhaps Ling had already packed her luggage. I packed all my watches and some slightly valuable items, hoping to sell them for some money tomorrow. My Cadillac CT6 was already towed away by the bank the day before yesterday. The only car I have now is an old pickup truck from 1978. Tontu, and a 125 motorcycle I bought 2 years ago. Xiaola. After thinking about it, I decided to start my new journey with these two friends. Sitting on the balcony, I took a can of beer and drank it on my own. I haven't been drinking much since I was 25 years old. I've tasted this taste again, as if I'm back to the time when I used to dance with friends on the campfire. The phone rang again. It was still Ling. What are you going to do next? Ling's tone made me very unhappy, as if in just 2 days, she had become the person I hated the most. I'm going out for a stroll. Where are you going? Aren't you going back to your hometown in Hunan? If you have anything, just say it, I interrupted her inquiry impatiently. It's okay, I've packed everything in the house and I've already moved out. I got it. Silent again on the phone, then hung up. I looked mockingly at the phone interface and drank the beer in one gulp. The next day, I first went to the agency to hang up the house. I only hung up 1.4 million yuan, hoping to sell this house as soon as possible. I found a luxury jewelry recycling store and sold all the watches for only 110,000 yuan. I felt a bit headache because I spent a full 1 million yuan on these at the time. Then I drove to the car city and modified the pickup truck. I added a lid to the bucket and a motorcycle tailstock to the back of the car. It was already around 6 p.m. after finishing all of this. Are you really ready to leave? My best friend Yang is currently holding a beer glass and curiously asking me. I nodded and took a sip of beer. Yang is my primary school and classmate. He has now become a senior executive in a certain online company, and his annual income is likely to reach 7 figures. Jiang, you used to be the crown prince of our city, so Uncle Jiang didn't leave anything for you. Whether your company can survive or not is sometimes just a matter of some people's words. My father's incident is the last thing I want to recall. It has been 3 years since he was inside. Every day, companies big and small are closing down in this city, which is a normal social situation. Some people can add icing on the cake and make it difficult for them to provide timely assistance. I took another sip of the wine and raised my glass, pretending to be relaxed. Besides, it's good now, buddy. I'm going to travel around China, so you can just waste your life in this steel jungle. Haha, Xingxie Jiang, go ahead. Wishing you a smooth journey. Feel free to ask for anything you need in the future. I just waited for him to say this, and after he finished speaking, I spoke up decisively. Borrow me 600,000. The air suddenly became silent for a moment, and Yang's eyes stared at me in a daze. His hand holding the wine glass paused, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Chapter 2. Kunming Women Buying Houses. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day before dawn, I was awakened by the phone call from the agent. Last night, in order to borrow money from Jiang, you gave me a terrible drink, and I am still confused at this moment. Hello boss, someone is interested in your house. They are coming to see it at 9 a.m. So fast. I'm a bit surprised by the speed. That's not it, after all, boss, your price is too suitable. I agreed, hung up the phone, and immediately sat on the bed, rubbing my temples in a daze. I took my phone and transferred the 600,000 yuan that had deceived Yang in my bank card yesterday to Ling. I exhaled a deep breath. Actually, no matter what time I wake up in the morning, I can't sleep anymore. It's because I drank too much last night that I forgot to mute the bell. After being alone in bed feeling lost for a long time, I reluctantly woke up, thinking that the buyer would arrive at 9 o'clock, so I decided to clean the room. By the time everything was done, it was already 8 o'clock in the morning. Loneliness suddenly swept through, and as I stumbled open the window, I suddenly realized that the morning was like a lonely and aloof woman, embracing everyone who woke up early. At 8:57, I heard the sound of the car engine coming to a stop downstairs. At exactly 9 o'clock, there was a loud knocking at the door. This is a very punctual buyer. This was my first impression back then. Opening the door, what caught my eye was a tall girl with curly waves, fair skin, and a raised chin. This mental state left me momentarily stunned. Looking at the house, I asked softly. The woman glanced lightly at me, let out a soft nod, and then walked straight into the room, examining each room on her own. I curled my lips and sat on the sofa again, lighting a cigarette, ignoring her. But what puzzles me is why the agent didn't bring her along. 10 minutes later, the woman sat opposite me with her legs crossed, full of temperament, but there was a touch of spring that was lifelike, and she didn't pay attention. Only I watched this scene thoughtfully. This girl is quite interesting. I really like your house. I know you really like it. How do you know? If you don't like it, you won't buy it. After hearing my answer, the woman in front of me suddenly froze in her movements and had an unnatural expression. Seeing this scene, I became even more certain of my own thoughts. This is just a little girl who pretends to be steady. 1.4 million, you can sign the contract now. The woman embraced her chest with both arms and spoke again in a cold voice. I suddenly wanted to tease the girl in front of me, bouncing my cigarette ash into the ashtray in front of me and saying something lightly. The price has changed now, 1.7 million. You. The woman became obviously angry when she heard my words, and her body, which was originally leaning on the sofa, suddenly became straight. What's wrong? If you can't afford it, forget it. I don't flinch, I'm joking. Anyway, I used to be the boss and would be impressed by your temperament. Although he is just a bankrupt boss. I'll buy it, sign the contract now. However, what surprised me was that the woman only thought for a few seconds before decisively agreeing. I was stunned. I just wanted to tease her, but I didn't expect this foolish woman to agree. What's teasing you is still 1.4 million. What confuses me is that women are exceptionally dominant. Don't tease me, 170 is 170. Sign the contract now. At this moment, I looked at the woman in front of me and could only speak in frustration. Then wait for the intermediary to come, they will bring the contract. So, we stared at each other face to face like fools, staring big and small. The woman seemed very uncomfortable when I saw her, so I took the initiative to ask. Why are you selling a house? Upon hearing this, I pulled out another cigarette and lit it, then asked in response. Have you ever heard a lyric? What lyrics? I want to sell my house and wander around the world. When I said this, I clearly saw that she was looking at me with a look that was like looking at a fool. Hee, I really don't know if you're being foolish or open-minded. I shrugged and didn't mind speaking. Who knows? Indeed, these days I have been in a state of regret and anxiety, coupled with Ling's sudden transformation, which has left me at a loss. However, upon reflection, there are also many unlucky people in this world, such as Pui, whose family is gone, and I am bankrupt with this house for sale. The room was once again silent, and the awkward atmosphere seemed contagious, making me feel a bit uncomfortable. The agent finally arrived late at this moment. Sorry for keeping you waiting for so long. This is an incompetent intermediary. If it were like him, most customers would probably have already signed the bill themselves and would never wait for him to come, but unfortunately, I am very uncomfortable with the woman in front of me. As the contract was signed, I learned that the woman in front of me was named Suzhou, a very unique surname and name. After completing the procedures, it was already past 4 p.m. I put my luggage in the back pocket of the pickup truck. Actually, I didn't have much luggage, except for clothes and some personal belongings. Feeling bored, he and the agent leaned in the car to smoke. After taking a look at the 1.7 million yuan received from my bank card, I felt a bit sad. Originally, I only wanted to sell it for 1.4 million yuan, but by chance, it was 300,000 more. After all, this woman is still wealthy. How much commission is this order? I took a puff of smoke and asked. Not much, hee. The agent held his cigarette holder and smiled without saying anything. I also smiled and shook my head, patting his shoulder. Actually, it doesn't matter how much commission I receive. The agency fee is paid by the woman named Suzhou, but she is quite wealthy. She doesn't even blink an eye for an extra 300,000 yuan. And at that moment, I noticed the car the woman was driving, the Porsche 911, it was really a good car. I lifted my head and looked at the floor of my house. No, it was the floor of my former home. I happened to see Suzhou staring at me on the balcony, his eyes facing each other. The woman glared at me fiercely and then dodged and retreated. Brother, actually I can feel that you have a lot of things on your mind. Are you going to drink together? Suddenly, the agent said such a sentence to me, which made me momentarily stunned. After a long silence, I laughed and asked. Next time when I return to Suzhou, I'll treat you to a drink. Do you want me to take you back to the company? No need, brother, I'm riding a little electric donkey. The little brother grinned and pointed to the tram on the roadside. I nodded, pushed the motorcycle towards the frame behind the pickup truck, and finally said something to the agent. By the way, don't let the buyers and sellers meet up early again next time. Driving a pickup truck on the highway, watching the rapidly fading scenery, I finally understood that I was leaving Suzhou, the city where I had lived for 5 years and had planned to spend the rest of my life with my loved one. Destination: Kunming. Just because when I signed the contract with the woman, I saw that her ID address was Kunming, and I also wanted to go to this city where birds sing and flowers are fragrant. I heard it has made Siberian seagulls fall in love with the 4 seasons of spring. As soon as I got on the highway, I received a call from Ling again. Jiang Zhan, repay the money, this time it's 300000. Chapter 3. Disputes in Service Areas. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I was momentarily stunned, then completely angry and cursed directly on the phone. Ling Ku, don't go too far, TM. However, Ling Ku on the other end of the phone seemed to have not heard her, with a cold tone. Jiang Zhan, your grandfather, why don't you repay the money? I've been with you for so many years, and in terms of frequency, it's more than 300,000, right? I was finally completely shattered by this woman's values. I clearly felt the vehicle shaking on the highway, hung up the phone, stopped at the nearest service area, took a deep breath, and called again. Ling Ku, this is the last time, isn't it? Yes. Later, I transferred 300,000 yuan to her bank account again. At this point, I blocked all the information about Ling Ku. I don't want to see this hypocritical woman anymore. Oh my God, what kind of actor have I been dating for the past 3 years? I looked at my bank card and now there are only 1.51 million left, which is the only number I have left. Of course, if I subtract the money owed to Chiang, there may not be even 100 left. Ling Ku is an orphan, and I once gave her all my love and heartache. However, when I fell into a slump, she kept thrusting through my heart in her unique way until I felt nothing. I took out a cigarette from my pocket and lit it. Sitting in the car, I watched the traffic in and out of the service area, feeling a bit dazed. The first half of my life should not have been like this. If my decision had not been wrong, if I could have been more serious, perhaps now I am still the same as before, and Ling Ku is still the gentle and moving Ling Ku. I even thought a little further, if my dad hadn't been investigated, if I suddenly became mentally ill again and missed Ling's body, her delicate breathing. The feeling of fish enjoying water made me feel suffocated. Suzhou is about 2,000 kilometers away from Kunming. I pushed open the car door and shook my head, trying to get myself back from that state. It took me a long time to recover my consciousness, then went to buy a few bottles of water and continued on my journey. When I drove to the service area in Hubei at 6 o'clock in the morning, I was really tired. I stayed up late driving for 7 hours continuously, which made me really exhausted. I finally realized that I was no longer young. After all, at the age of 18, I could ride for a day and a night without rest. After stopping the car, I fell asleep in a daze. I had a dream. I saw my dad teaching me when I was young, saw Ling snuggling up in my arms and saying that she was super invincible and liked me, and saw a lot. In the blink of an eye, the dream turned into a scene of my father being investigated, and into a scene of Ling forcefully forcing me to repay her money, which instantly woke me up. I looked at my watch and it was already 1 o'clock in the afternoon. At this moment, I suddenly saw a large group of people not far ahead bustling and making noise around a car. Curiosity drove me to stop the car and walk over with a cigarette in my mouth. Getting closer, I suddenly saw that the car was a Porsche 911, which was a rare item. I also thought that the girl who bought my house was driving this car. However, as I approached, I realized that this was the same car, and at that moment, a woman named Jiang was sitting in the car, surrounded by a group of men. Only by asking a few people around did they know that the car was broken. The owner of the car called for maintenance personnel from a 4S dealership outside, which caused dissatisfaction among the maintenance personnel in the local service area. I quickly pushed aside a few people and knocked on the window. The car window lowered, revealing a haggard yet still beautiful face. "Do you need any help?" I asked softly. Jiang was noticeably surprised when he saw it was me. He nodded and his gaze flickered, revealing a hint of starlight, which was extremely beautiful. "Who is your special code?" A tall and fierce man led by him, upon seeing this scene, directly pointed his spear at me. "Brother, this way, let's go aside and talk first." I brought these people to my car, and 10 minutes later, I came back again. "I have already taken care of everything." I casually picked up a thick piece of clothing. It was very cold in Wuhan in March, and I saw that Jiang was only wearing a thin black long-sleeved shirt. I handed her the thick piece of clothing and then lowered my head to light a cigarette. "How did you handle it?" "You know, I've been talking for a long time and they just don't listen." Jiang asked curiously. I gave a slight smile. "I gave them 2,000 per person." Jiang was stunned. I looked at her wooden and surprised expression, took a puff of smoke, and spoke again. "When going out, there are 2 types of people who are least likely to be bullied. The first type is ruthless. As long as you are more ruthless than others, there won't be such a situation. The second type is unjust. The world is prosperous, and everything that can be solved with money is not called a problem. Even if you can handle things better with money." Upon hearing my words, Jiang pondered for a moment and nodded in agreement. "I'll transfer the money to you." I just smiled and shook my head. "How did you get here?" "I'm a bit curious, so I changed the topic. Do you know that when I left last night, she was still in Suzhou, and today she is in Wuhan? There's something going on in Kunming. Why not take a plane?" My casual question made her look a little surprised, and I suddenly realized that I had asked too much, so I quickly waved my hand. "For personal matters, be sure to drive this car." She probably thought for a long time before considering speaking up. And I became even more curious, what is this car about? Surprisingly, she took the trouble to drive the Porsche 911 alone for over 2,000 kilometers to Kunming. You need to know the driving experience of a sports car, but it's hard to describe in a single word. Since she didn't say anything, I didn't ask again. The air suddenly fell silent. Zhujian glanced at me, probably thinking of what we talked about that day and asking. Where are you going? Are you really selling your house and wandering around the world? Kunming. Just like you. I'll treat you to dinner in Kunming. Okay, as we chatted aimlessly, her car had already been repaired. So, a pickup truck and a Porsche 911 went smoothly from Wuhan to Kunming, one in front and one behind. On the car, Yang called to inquire. Where have you been? Just past Wuhan. I originally wanted to talk to Yang about this Porsche girl, but after some thought, I still didn't say anything. Ling called me. After a moment of silence, Yang suddenly spoke. Don't pay attention to her, she's just a crazy woman. You can't even imagine how disgusting she is to me. I cursed angrily and thought of what she said. It's more than 300,000 times. She seems to be in the hospital. When I was on the phone, I heard the voice calling for a nurse. Yang spoke again, with a tone that seemed to have a different feeling. I didn't want to hear anything about Ling at this time, so I hung up the phone citing poor signal. Chapter 4. Arriving in Kunming. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. When my vehicle followed the Porsche ahead and arrived in Kunming, it was already 6 o'clock the next morning. I was indeed attracted by this gentle land. If Wuhan is still a winter with cold winds howling, then here is probably the warm and windy early spring. This is my second time coming to Yunnan, but it is my first time coming to Kunming. Unfortunately, when we got off the highway, Zhujian and I got separated in the crowded traffic. What's even more regrettable is that I didn't have her contact information. But the overnight drive made me too tired. I randomly found a hotel and parked my pickup truck in the parking lot. Without even picking up my luggage, I walked into the hotel and lay down. In an instant, I fell asleep. In this dream, it turned out to be Zhujian. I dreamt that she was very sad alone, standing there quietly calling out to me. In my dream, I asked her for her phone number, but suddenly she turned into a look of melancholy. After 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I rubbed my sleepy eyes and sat alone in the room smoking. Before being with Ling, I often had this kind of state, so I didn't feel lonely. Throw the cigarette butt in my hand into the ashtray, go downstairs and remove my motorcycle from the motorcycle rack. Turn on the switch and twist the throttle, the motorcycle emits a melodious roar. 20 minutes later, I arrived at the Hagang Dam in Kunming, and at first glance, groups of seagulls were hovering above people's heads. There were too many people here. I parked my motorcycle in any spot and walked along the observation deck smoking cigarettes. When I got tired, I rested in the nearby seat for a while. Suddenly, I saw a familiar figure. A woman wearing thin black long sleeves and a light gauze skirt swaying in the wind, her loose and smooth long hair also fluttering in the wind. She looked lonely at the circling seagulls, and I will never forget this scene. My eyes stared, but my hand was put into my pocket, and I took out my phone with a click. I then put this beautiful figure into my phone. Seeing that Zhujian hadn't noticed me yet, I stepped forward and lightly patted her. Hi, beautiful woman, can you add a WeChat account? However, her first emotion upon seeing me was not happiness, but anger and confusion. It took her a long time to speak. Where did you go? How long did I wait for you at the highway intersection? Do you know? And upon hearing this, I finally realized that we were not separated at the highway intersection, but she had been waiting for me. But what's more dramatic is that I didn't see her waiting for me. I thought you were going to handle your affairs, but I didn't expect you to be waiting for me. Upon hearing me say this, Zhujian just glanced at me before turning his head again. Her profile was beautiful, like an ink painting, and I suddenly thought of the dream I had. Standing next to her, I placed my hand on the railing and whispered a sentence. It's very beautiful. Upon hearing this, she smiled slightly and nodded. I took out my phone and placed the photo in front of her, smiling. I'm talking about you. Zhujian turned his head to look at me and opened his mouth. After hesitating for a moment, he smiled and muttered two words. Thank you. For a moment, we fell silent again. Are you waiting for me? I haven't slept all day. What's up with you? My 3 consecutive questions left her a bit stunned, and it took her a long time to reply. I slept in the car for a while, and my business has ended. He has already left. Upon hearing this from him, my heart suddenly tightened. As Zhujian said, did she come back specifically for this man? Or is it that I misunderstood? She may also represent a woman, but a woman is worth driving a sports car from Suzhou to Kunming for over 2,000 kilometers, and she can't even take a plane. I became even more silent. If it were 2 months ago, I might still have some confidence, but now, all my assets combined may not be as much as the pocket money of the girl in front of me. As for why, it's because I saw the watch on her wrist. Richard Miller red gold watch, market reference price. 1.9 million. I used to see more expensive watches in front of me, but for me now, it's just a thing of the past. And the person she wants to see, perhaps at least financially, is on par with her. This is the first time I have experienced the terrifying difference. The class gap makes me feel suffocated, and I suddenly feel that although she really exists in front of me, we are like 2 parallel lines with no possibility. Thinking of this, my budding inner flame was fiercely cut off by myself. Perhaps I was too engrossed in my thoughts, as a puddle of bird droppings fell on the tip of my nose without even paying attention. She turned around and gently wiped away the bird droppings on my nose with paper. Let's go, I'll treat you to dinner. So, I sat with the woman in front of me at a Western restaurant, and she ordered 2 bowls of pasta. Actually, I would rather go eat the braised soup next door. As I watched her chew her food slowly, I suddenly spoke up a bit out of nowhere. I think there are soy egg next door. Do you want to eat soy egg? I'll buy 2. Upon hearing my words, she seemed to suddenly choke while eating. She took a few sips of water before taking it down, but lowered her head and didn't look at me. If you want to eat, go buy it. I really got up and bought 2 soy egg next door. I really didn't like this kind of Western food, especially this noodles. I felt that it was not as good as a bowl of mixed noodles. When I came back, I put one in my plate and the other in her plate. I finished the noodles in the bowl in just a few bites and then let out a comfortable burp. Looking up, I found her looking at me. What's wrong? I asked in confusion. Your temperament is really different from your person. At first, I didn't understand her meaning, but it quickly became clear to me. I took out a cigarette and was about to light it, thinking that such a restaurant might be smoking free, so I just held it in my hand. I may have been more influenced by my father. He went to the countryside when he was young, and although he came back later, it could be considered a success, but sometimes he is not as elegant as me. I don't know why, but I don't know how to talk about my father to the person in front of me. Fortunately, Zhujian did not inquire further. She just stared out the window in a daze. The person I like has left. Upon hearing these words, my heart was moved. Indeed, the person she was looking for was indeed a man. And at this moment, I unexpectedly saw a tearful face turn its head, and I didn't speak, just silently looking at him. He promised me to stay with me in China, but he still left. Why don't you take a plane? It's so fast. Because this car was given to me by him, he said he wants to see it with me when he leaves. I suddenly became speechless. What kind of oddity is this? Chapter 5. The appearance of Ling. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At 9 o'clock in the evening, I sat quietly in the hotel, lost in thought. The crowd outside the window was surging, and I suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. After closing the curtains, it eased a bit. I touched the cigarette box in my pocket, grateful that there was still one inside. The smoke on my fingertips burned into wisps of mist, gradually transforming into a graceful dance of a woman. I was immersed in it, but the dance was interrupted by the ringing of the phone. I glanced at my phone and it was my younger sister who has been studying abroad in the UK. When I answered the phone, the first thing I heard was the cheerful and energetic voice. "Brother, where are you?" "Kunming. I feel a slight mistake. You know, when she calls me, she doesn't ask where I am except for money." "Sure enough," she said with great regret. "Ah. I thought you were in Suzhou, Kunming. Okay, wait for me to find you." "Hey, how did you respond?" Unfortunately, my phone was hung up before I could finish a sentence. I was a bit speechless, but when I called again, it showed that the phone was turned off. I frowned and said, "Did you get on the plane so soon?" I let out a deep sigh, and then my phone beeped. It's WeChat sent by Jiang. "Did you sleep?" After thinking for a moment, I still replied. "Not yet, get ready to take a shower. Can you accompany me for a stroll?" When Jiang said this sentence, I actually wanted to refuse. After all, my rationality told me that the gap between me and her now is not ordinary. And I am not someone who doesn't know the right balance. Unfortunately, in human history, reason has never defeated sensibility. Okay. As I rode my motorcycle carrying Jiang on the streets of Kunming at night, the warm wind blew our bodies, and I unknowingly returned to the dam where we met during the day. Some of the speakers here are still playing the thumping sound of seagulls during the day, so I and Jiang are taking a walk here. "Tell me your story. I'm a bit interested." Suddenly, Jiang said this sentence to me, and then sat with me on the nearby chair. I took out a cigarette and lit it with a click. I don't have much story either. After dropping out of school at the age of 18, I rode a motorcycle and played alone in China for 3 years. I have been to almost all parts of the country. Later, I went to study media advertising and opened a media company in Suzhou. Went bankrupt a week ago. I tried to narrate my experiences over the past decade in concise language, and also calmly recounted my failures. Jiang rolled his hair that had been blown away by the wind and looked at me with a hazy expression in his eyes. "What about your ex-girlfriend?" I was taken aback, holding a cigarette and turning my head to look at her, my eyes facing each other. Although there are not many traces of that girl's existence in the house, they can still be found in the small ones. The lipstick marks on the wash basin, a few strands of long hair at the bathroom drain, and the makeup mirror in the master bedroom drawer. I quietly watched as Jiang revealed the details she had discovered. "That's right, she left the day before I sold the house." I smoked a cigarette hard and spoke calmly. "So you were also abandoned by others." Upon hearing this sentence, I realized that when emotions resonate, we are the people who know each other the best about ourselves in this world. The wind is getting stronger in a daze. I seem to see Ling appearing in front of me, staring straight at me like that. I took a puff of smoke and looked up again, only to realize that the person in front of me was really Ling. After a few days without seeing her, she became even thinner, and her face seemed a bit pale. She first glanced at Jiang sitting next to me, and then looked at me with a straight and puzzled expression in her eyes. I suddenly got a little angry and laughed. "Didn't you dump me? How come you're acting like I'm sorry to you now?" And Jiang also seemed to feel something, rolled his hair again, stood up and gave me a deep look, then walked away step by step. "How do you know I'm here?" I took a puff and asked silently. "How fast?" "Just broke up and found a new one." Ling didn't seem to want to answer my question and spoke sarcastically. I fiercely threw my cigarette butt onto the ground, stood up and looked at her flat. "Ling, you need to figure it out. It's you who divided the hands with me. Can you control me now?" I almost cursed at her with the most unpleasant words I could imagine. But her eyes turned red, but she still stood there stubbornly, biting her lips and speaking firmly. "Jiang Zhan, let me tell you, I am the person who loves you the most in this world. I interrupted her angrily, trembling as I pointed my finger at her face. Enough, Ling Ku, you. The one who loves me the most. He, don't forget, you are the first person to abandon me, the one who asks for money after breaking up, and the one who counts us by the number of times is also you. Now tell me that the person you love the most is me. How did you have the courage to say this? There were not many people at night at the dam, and my roar made many people look sideways. Even Zhuo Jian, who had not yet walked far, stopped and looked at me in surprise. The tears on Ling Ku's face shattered her makeup, revealing the pallor of her skin. I saw her body swaying gently, but she remained stubborn. I sat dejectedly on the bench, seeing Ling Ku sobbing incessantly but still staring at me. I was wondering if my tone was too heavy. But in the end, words of comfort didn't come out of my mouth. Finally, Ling Ku only left one sentence. I will come again. Leaving me alone on the bench in the wind, smoking alone. After about 10 minutes, Zhuo Jian sat next to me with 2 bottles of water. I thought you had left. I stared at the dazzling light strip in the distance and said this. A bottle of twisted water was placed in front of me, followed by Zhuo Jian's unique voice. You brought me here on a motorcycle, can't you let me go back alone? I took the water and drank a bottle of water in retaliation. Is that your girlfriend? Left Jian's soft inquiry. Ex-girlfriend. My tone was cold, and I even deepened the tone of the word ex. I can tell she loves you very much. I looked at Zhuo Jian incredulously, my throat wriggling. Does she love me very much? She was the first to leave me after I went bankrupt, and after the breakup, she kept asking me to repay her money, even taking us. I didn't say the rest. I don't think it's something that can be shared with people, especially when they are still a beautiful girl. However, Zhuo Jian did not refute me and looked at the direction of Ling Ku's departure, pondering. When we returned, it was already past 11 in the evening. Watching Zhuo Jian walk slowly into the villa without saying a word, I slowly rode my motorcycle back to my residence. Sitting on the bed, a warm sensation came from the corner of my eyes, and I felt lost. Yes, I got lost on a one-way street called love. All the promises and promises on this road have become false, and all the lingering love is so illusory. I always thought I was strong enough to face all the consequences of making mistakes, but now I realize that I was wrong. I am still Jiang Zhan, who wanted to escape every time I encountered difficulties 10 years ago. Chapter 6. Free Homestay. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day, I woke up at 5 o'clock and touched my cigarette box, but none of them were left. Putting on her clothes and walking downstairs, she realized that Ling Ku was sitting quietly on the sofa in the hotel lobby, staring blankly. Her condition was not good, and she looked a bit embarrassed. You know, she used to be a beauty lover. I glanced at her and ignored her, walking out on my own. However, Ling Ku noticed me and kept following behind me. There aren't many people on the streets of Kunming at 5 a.m., but strangely, there were so many outrageous 24-hour convenience stores before, and now I can't find any. I walked alone for a long time, feeling increasingly irritable and turning around suddenly. Ling Ku may not have expected me to suddenly turn around and collide with me unexpectedly. Ling Ku, what exactly do you want to do? I looked at the woman in front of me with a hint of disgust, my tone cold. I miss you. Ling Ku looked at me for a long time and suddenly hugged me. The gentle 3 words rang in my ear. In a daze, I seemed to see Ling Ku again, but after a moment, I still resolutely broke off her hand. We've already broken up, you mentioned it. I would like to reiterate what I said. Ling Ku, what you're doing now is meaningless, it just makes me feel nauseous. Go back. Ling Ku did not refute, just took out my favorite pack of cigarettes from the pocket of her shirt. Here you are. Last night I saw that there weren't many cigarettes in your cigarette pack. I suddenly softened in the depths of my heart, took the cigarette, tore off the film, took out a stick and lit it with a snap, leaning against the street lamp post and smoking with a snap. You should smoke less in the future. Ling watched as my gentle voice rang out. My smoking hand paused slightly, and suddenly I felt as if the person in front of me had become Ling, who used to accompany me and watch me with a gentle smile. However, in an instant, she had become Ling, who demanded money from me aggressively. How did you find me? I spoke expressionlessly. Our mobile IDs are the same. The girl's back photo you took, I searched and found it to be at Kunming Dam. You live here and have also taken photos. I want to know which room you are in, but the front desk won't tell me. She became more and more aggrieved as she spoke, and even cried again. But I don't know why, I no longer have the feeling of feeling sorry for her when she cried before, especially when I think of her saying, times, my heart feels like eating a fly. After a long time, Ling coughed a few times before gently opening her mouth. Jiang Zhan, do you know why you failed? Upon hearing this, I smoked and squinted at her. Isn't that why I came? Isn't she running so far just to mock me? What else do you think of me? It's really ridiculous. I remained indifferent and flicked the cigarette ash, nodding to signal her to continue speaking. In this world, most merchants are like hungry wolves eating meat without spitting out bones, their eyes emitting a green light. And you, Jiang Zhan, are just a sheep that is indecisive and full of ridiculous idealism. Once you had shepherds to protect you, but without them, your end would be to be eaten with nothing left under their siege. After listening to Ling's confession, I looked into her eyes and saw that the smoke in my hand had dissipated into the wind. For a moment, I didn't know how to refute it. However, her words suddenly changed and she stared at me. But I don't care what you become, as long as it's you. This is the first time I have heard Ling's heartfelt confession. Before, she would never say these words. She would only bring me fruits and sit next to me, sweetly listening to what I said. Looking into her eyes, I shook the box of cigarettes for a moment, then put it in my pocket and walked towards the hotel. Ling was still following me. But I checked out at the bar, put my luggage on my pickup truck, and pushed the motorcycle onto the rack. Buzz, the engine roared and the vehicle flashed away. In the rearview mirror, I looked at Ling, who was quietly standing alone on the early morning streets of Kunming in her thin clothes. She pursed her lips and watched me leave with loneliness. And I didn't look back. Once a person has a barrier, they can no longer recover as before. Broken mirror and reunion, cracks still exist. I parked my car across the river from the observation deck near Kunming Dam, and drew another cigarette from my pocket. Nicotine is eroding my lungs, but the humid morning air in Kunming is nourishing my body. Not long after, my phone rang. It's a message from Ling. Jiang Zhan, I'm back in Suzhou, you need to be okay. Take a deep breath, and I will also give her a message. You too. There have been more people on the road, and nicotine seems to have had little effect on me, leaving me with no feeling at all. A pedal motorcycle suddenly stopped by my car window, and the reflective helmet lenses were lifted, revealing a weathered face. He glanced at my car, glanced at me, and asked. Did you contact me to stay at the hotel? I held a cigarette in one hand and frowned as I replied. It's me. Actually, the first time I saw this person, I felt in my heart that he was unreliable, especially with various patterns on other motorcycles. The man nodded at the words. You can drive with me. I'm the owner of a homestay, just call me Yasuo. Yasuo. I was not free for a moment. Yes, a man like the wind. Who can still give his real name these days? The man named Yasuo smiled slightly, his head shook, and his glasses immediately fell off. Then he rode away with a buzzing sound on his motorcycle. After pondering for a moment, I decided to drive and follow him. After the vehicle followed him through several alleys, it was obvious that my car was almost unable to move through this alley when the homestay finally arrived. He opened a door for me and I drove the car inside. After getting off the car, I looked at the sign of the homestay. Free homestay. I recited word by word. Upon hearing my words, Yasuo took off his helmet with a handsome expression and proudly said, "Cool." I nodded in agreement, but pointed to the free "you" on the sign and spoke up. "Cool is really cool, it's just that your freedom is about to fall off, don't hit anyone." "It's okay, it won't fall off. I fixed it with wire." Yasuo waved his hand without paying any attention. I was speechless for a moment, and that thing was clearly shaking left and right. "By the way, I noticed that you also have a motorcycle attached to the back of your car. Let's take a motorcycle ride together when we have time." "I have something else to do, let's go first." Before I could reply, he rode his motorcycle and ran away without even telling me which room I lived in, or even asking for money. He left me alone in the messy courtyard of the homestay. Looking at the homestay, I realized that it was a 3-story building with a small courtyard. There were many flowers and plants planted in the courtyard, but they were almost dead and looked a bit dilapidated. Counting the rooms, there were 3 rooms on the first and second floors, and 2 on the third floor. Walking upstairs, I found that both rooms on the third floor were locked, indicating that someone was staying. The 3 rooms on the first floor are filled with miscellaneous items, only the 3 rooms on the second floor can be occupied. I randomly selected a middle room and lay in bed, listening to music and daydreaming. Perhaps I woke up too early this morning, or maybe I was too tired. When a wave of drowsiness hit, I had no resistance and fell asleep. Chapter 7. A City in the Sky. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I woke up and for some reason, I have become very sleepy lately. It's getting dim outside the window, and it seems like it's going to rain in Kunming. I habitually opened my phone and glanced at it. There were 17 unanswered calls, all of which were my sister. Rubbing her sleepy head, she walked back to her. "Jiang Zhan, your grandfather didn't answer your own sister's phone." Jiang Shuqi screamed on the phone, heart-wrenching and heart-wrenching, causing a slight pain in my ears. I quickly took my phone away. "What are you doing?" I spoke in dissatisfaction. "I'm here in Kunming." I suddenly sat up from the bed, looking bewildered. "Aren't you in the UK? When did you return to China?" "Don't worry, quickly send me the location." When I sent the location to my sister, I was extremely conflicted. How should I tell her about the company? After all, I haven't told my mother about my bankruptcy. I don't want her to worry about my father 3 years ago and worry about me 3 years later. Things shouldn't be like this. She should enjoy her old age peacefully. Tidy up the room next to me, and I'll sit on the lounge chair on the first floor, staring at the dim sky in a daze. It's going to rain, it's really nice. 20 minutes later, a youthful and beautiful figure suddenly appeared in my eyes. "Jiang Zhan, you're quite leisurely." The figure let out a sigh. I sat up and saw Jiang Shuqi with a backpack on her back. Yu Guang noticed a figure behind her. "Brother." I knew who it was when I heard this shy shout. My sister's playmate from childhood to adulthood, Jiang Yuding. "Yuding, you're here too." I raised my hand and said hello, then looked at my sister and slowly lit a cigarette. I calmly spoke. "I think you need to give me an explanation." However, my sister's words made my cigarette lighter pause. "Why don't you explain your situation to me and our mother?" My cigarette lighter continued, speaking lightly. "What's up with me? Don't make garlic for me. You." Before she could finish her sentence, there was a thunderous sound in the sky, followed by the flickering sound of rain in the blink of an eye. I quickly took the 2 of them to a room on the second floor that I had prepared. After putting my luggage away, I drove the car out to eat with the 2 of them. Today's rain is particularly heavy, and there are fewer cars on the street. "What do you want to eat?" I held a cigarette in my mouth and opened the car window a bit. The rain outside dripped haphazardly into the car window, but I didn't pay attention. Compared to getting my clothes a little wet, it would be uncomfortable for me not to smoke. Wait, let me check what's delicious in Kunming. The two started to look for online celebrity restaurants in TikTok. I was bored and looked at Jiang Zhan and smiled. Is Zhan 23 years old this year? She's still so shy. Upon hearing what I said, her cheeks turned even redder and she gave me a slight smile. Only my sister grumbled out of place. It also depends on the person, and I'll be shy towards you. I was taken aback and saw Zhan pushing my sister in the rearview mirror, but her face turned even redder. I scratched my nose and felt a bit embarrassed. Just eat this, eat this. Jiang Zhan may have discovered something delicious and suddenly exclaimed. Half an hour later, I came out of the internet celebrity restaurant and watched the two people enjoying themselves. I really didn't think the taste was bad, to be honest, it was not as delicious as a bowl of braised soup. Sitting alone on a chair under the eaves of the restaurant, smoking and enjoying the rain, I suddenly noticed a familiar figure walking slowly in the rain among the many people coming and going. She is really eye-catching. Almost everyone on the road, with or without an umbrella, walks very fast, except for this woman who walks in the rain like a fool without an umbrella. Hello, beautiful woman, are you cold or not? I lay sideways and shouted. The girl turned her head and saw that it was me. She was momentarily taken aback, then quickly walked over to my side. I pointed to the seat next to me and handed her a tissue. The woman is exactly Zhujian. Are you stupid? What kind of artistic atmosphere are you in this heavy rain? You'll have a good time catching a cold tomorrow. I angrily wiped her hair with a tissue, but she just spoke softly. I just want to get soaked in the rain. What's wrong? Zhujian looked at the crowds coming and going like me. He called me and told me to wait for him for 3 years. I sneered and threw the cigarette holder into the small puddle in front of me, making a growling sound. So you have to wait. I don't know. After mutual silence, she asked me. How could you be here? I pointed to the two people inside and said. My sister and her best friend are here, please treat them to a meal. Oh. If it were in the past, I would never have believed that women could become good friends in an instant. But now, I completely believe it. Jiang Zhan and her two have been chatting with Zhujian for 23 minutes now. During this time, when I was completely silent, I had to drive silently and listen to the three people in the car, from discussing celebrities to discussing cosmetics. Do you live here? Upon arriving at the destination, Zhujian had a puzzled expression, especially the shaky "you" sign, which now appeared even more eye-catching. Well, it's quite comfortable here. Look, the Freedom Homestay is more in line with me. I smiled awkwardly. However, Zhujian did not say anything. The boss named Yasuo has returned and is wiping his motorcycle. I'm back, boss. I forgot to tell you that we have 300 accommodations per month and 4,000 accommodations per year. Look at you. In the gap between wiping the motorcycle, he glanced up at me, but couldn't leave his eyes anymore. Beauty. Beautiful women, are you also staying in a hotel? I immediately rolled my eyes. Kunming, which is raining, actually has more charm. We just sit under the eaves of this small courtyard in silence, which is interesting for Jiang Zhan. He keeps spraying and plugging K on his phone, playing happily. Brother, can you play a song? Zhujian suddenly turned her head to ask me, and I was taken aback before laughing. Of course you can. Zhujian looked at me in confusion. I stood up and took out a round object from the car. What is this? Zhujian asked in confusion. Sun. I grinned. Looking at the sun in my hand, this can be considered the only joy of my childhood. My parents were very busy when I was young, and when I was young, there was only sun. Its ethereal voice almost healed all the loneliness of my childhood. Sitting upright, I squeezed my mouth with both hands and exhaled with the beat of my fingers and lips. A ethereal sound gradually came, like an ancient echo, a forgotten heavenly sound, so people almost closed their eyes slightly at this moment. I noticed a girl wearing a raincoat and carrying a drawing board walking towards me from the door. As she passed by, she gave me a gentle glance, and her footsteps suddenly stopped. Then, she stepped up the stairs again. The song ends. What kind of music is this? It's so familiar. Suzhou asked me softly, holding his cheek. Sky City, Hayao Miyazaki's Sky City. I was about to give a forced answer when my sister's voice rang out. It makes me feel like I'm back in my childhood. Yuding's red lips parted slightly, looking at me with flowing eyes. Chapter 8. Qi Yang is getting married. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, so Suzhou probably didn't want to go back and stayed in another room next to me. During this time, I found Yasuo. Just now I saw a woman carrying a drawing board up there, and she also lives here. At this moment, Yasuo was playing with his helmet in the room and didn't look up when he heard my inquiry. Yes, that woman's name is Ling. She's a strange person. She goes out early and comes back late every day, drawing various kinds of pictures. Whatever she says, she will definitely draw the most beautiful clouds in her heart and give them to someone. I looked at another room on the third floor with dim yellow lights, lost in thought. At night, the rain in Kunming has turned into fierce winds and showers, with thunder roaring. My sister and Yuding sleep in the same room, while Suzhou sleeps alone in another room. I lay in bed and habitually glanced at the content on my phone. Apart from various software push messages, there was no other information. Dong dong dong. The door suddenly rang, and I pushed it open. This figure flashed in. What are you doing? I frowned and looked at the person who came in. It was my sister Jiang Zhan. Brother, to be honest with me, your company has gone bankrupt, and sister Ling has also broken up with you. Unexpectedly, Jiang Zhan looked at me unusually calmly at this moment, sitting on my bed and speaking in an extremely calm tone. The room was extremely dull. I opened the window and turned my head to look at her. Two pairs of eyes kept colliding, and for a long time, I was deflated. How do you know? I lit a cigarette, let out a long sigh, and sat next to her. It's not how I know, it's our mom who asked me to ask you. If you still want to keep it from us, you're looking down on our mom too much, right? Jiang Zhan glared angrily at me like that. I just don't want our mom to stay restless. 3 years ago, I was worried about our dad, but now. You should keep these words and go home to tell our mother. Jiang Zhan interrupted me without hesitation. I'm going to Dali with Yuding tomorrow, so you can be alone here. Jiang Zhan stood up and walked to the door, but then stopped. Brother, this woman is not suitable for you. I think sister Ling is the most suitable for you. After finishing speaking, she closed the door and walked out. And I frowned and thought a lot, not even noticing that the smoke had burned to my hand. Hiss. I quickly threw away my cigarette butt and lay in bed daydreaming. Why does everyone feel that Ling loves me very much? Even my sister thinks she's the best fit for me. I was a bit puzzled and suddenly thought that when I arrived in Kunming, Qi Yang would tell me that Ling seemed to be in the hospital. I also thought about her pale face when she came to find me. After thinking for a long time, I took the initiative to send her a message. I heard from Qi Yang before that you were in the hospital. How are you doing? Staring at the information interface for 10 minutes, there was no response. At this time, the thunderstorm in Kunming has become even heavier, with lightning and thunder echoing each other dong dong dong. My door rang again, and I was a bit angry. Why is this? Opening the door, I found that the one standing at the door was actually Suzhou. Can we talk about that? Suzhou looked conflicted. Sure. I was taken aback and moved away from my seat. Quietly, the sky once again resounded with a thunderbolt. Jian was clearly startled. Sitting closer to me, I noticed a different smell in the air. After a moment of silence, I spoke to her. "Are you afraid of thunder?" She nodded, sitting in a position that almost touched me. Jian pinched for a moment, as if thinking of something, and spoke up. "When you were 18 years old, didn't you ride a motorcycle across the country? Can you tell me where you think the most unforgettable place is?" Upon hearing the woman's inquiry, I instantly opened my conversation box. "Sure, that was July 2014. I rode my Honda 125 motorcycle across National Highway 219, starting from Fangchengang in Guangxi and passing through the starting point of the Bingchacha section. Bing's Hongluo. Its name means a place where humans and gods live together." I looked at Jian and she looked curious, gesturing for me to continue speaking. I lit a cigarette and continued talking. "After entering the high-altitude area of Zizang, about 100 kilometers away, you will have to cross 3 snow mountain passes, namely Xiangzala, Yishala and Changla. The altitude will rise at an extremely high speed of more than 4,000 meters, and then drop to the valley at an extremely high speed of more than 1,000 meters. The next 100 kilometers will make you feel the scenery of the 4 seasons of the mountain. But the road was not repaired at that time, and I also suffered a lot and almost died there." I could clearly feel that she was full of longing for everything she said to me, so I chased after her victory. "When I have the opportunity in the future, I will definitely take you back to 219 and show you the beautiful scenery of our motherland." "Okay." Jian nodded heavily as he looked at me. "This may be a promise, but when I revisit 219 a year later, there is no one around me." Boom. Suddenly, I heard a loud collision and the sound of heavy objects falling to the ground. When Jian and I went out to take a look, the U finally couldn't bear the weight and fell heavily, hitting the tiles in the small garden. We even vaguely saw several flower pots shattered. So, in the heavy rain at the Kunming Homestay late at night, a person shouted loudly and crazily. "Yasuo, Yasuo, you have fallen out. Stop shouting, I know now." Upon hearing the unpleasant voice, Jian and I exchanged a glance and smiled slightly. "I'm afraid of thunder." Jian suddenly hugged me, murmuring in a voice unique to her. At that moment, I felt as if my entire body had been emptied of the snowy night, and I wanted to embrace him with one hand, but slowly let go. After a sleepless night, Jian and I slept in bed like this. When I woke up the next day, I saw Jian lying in my arms like this at first glance, and even her lips were unconsciously wriggling in my sleep. Suddenly, I had a wild idea and turned my head to look at no one, so I gently kissed her lips. When I knocked on my sister's door, I found that the building was empty. Habitually taking out my phone, I saw the message my sister sent me. "Brother, we went to Dali. Wishing you both a happy time." At the end of the message, there were 2 awkward and mischievous expressions. I awkwardly rubbed my nose. After all, this matter was mocked by my sister, and it was always a shameless thing. By the time Jian woke up and finished washing up, neither of us had spoken of anything about last night, but from each other's eyes, I knew we already had different feelings in our hearts. The phone suddenly rang and it turned out to be Yang. "I'm getting married." The first sentence after connecting was that Yang told me he was getting married. I was suddenly startled. "So fast? Is this fast? Remember to come to Suzhou next Tuesday." When I hung up the phone, I was still in a confused state. I took a look at my watch. Today is Sunday, next Tuesday is the day after tomorrow. Yang's partner was someone I met last year, I haven't met before. But I didn't expect to get married so soon. My mind hadn't turned around yet. I always thought we were still young, but suddenly realized that Yang was already 29 years old. It turned out that we were no longer young. "What's wrong?" Jian came out with a facial mask and asked me. "My friend is getting married, and I'm probably going back to Suzhou. I looked at Zhujian and slowly spoke. I'll be with you. Upon hearing these words, I suddenly felt a bit disoriented and confused. If nothing unexpected happens, I would send the best wishes to Chiang with Ling, but the people around me have changed at this moment, and they have been the ones I have only known for a few days, Zhujian. I took out my phone, thought for a long time, and changed my WeChat signature to. Life is unpredictable, the large intestine covers the small intestine. Chapter 9. Return to Suzhou. You are listening at novelfull.audio. That afternoon, Zhujian drove his own car, but this time it was not the 911 from last time. I replaced it with a white Porsche Macan. I have ridden many luxury cars, but this is the first time for the Macan. Sitting in the passenger seat, I couldn't help but take a few more glances. It seems that Zhujian is particularly fond of Porsche, whether it is the 911 or the Macan, which are almost the best in Porsche. I didn't pack my luggage much, after all, it was just for a wedding. After the wedding, I will come back. I have a little love and nostalgia for the city of Kunming. We were at 6 p.m. in the afternoon, and Zhujian drove me to the airport. We took the earliest flight to Shanghai. Yes, there is no airport in Suzhou. On the way to Kunming Airport, I was lying in the passenger seat smoking a cigarette in boredom when Zhujian suddenly asked me. Jiang Zhan. How many girlfriends have you talked about? I held my cigarette and thought for a moment, then opened my mouth with a hint of probing. 3. Just when I said this, I knew it was bad because the expression on Zhujian's face clearly became bad. It's better not to mention the special code, I thought to myself. From the back to the airport until taking the plane, Zhujian didn't say a word to me. After leaving the airport, Chiang was already waiting for us, sitting in the back seat. The silence in the car was somewhat oppressive, making me restless. I had to speak bitterly. My good friend and college classmate, Chiang. I first introduced Chiang and then introduced Zhujian to him. My beautiful landlady, along with my beautiful confidant, left note. Unfortunately, the two did not get to know each other well through my introduction, and after nodding to each other, the car became silent again. Helplessly, I handed a cigarette to Chiang, opened the car window, and lit another one myself. Chiang glanced at me in the rearview mirror, then glanced at Zhujian, lit his cigarette, and asked. Xiao Zhan, where are you staying tonight? Isn't your house already sold? Just as I was about to speak, Zhujian took one step ahead of me. I bought the house, and he still lives there at night. Looking at Chiang's bewildered questioning gaze, I nodded helplessly. I don't know how to express my feelings at this moment. Suddenly, I felt a bit uncomfortable with the cigarette in my hand, so I threw away the cigarette that I had only smoked half of. Put the two of us at the entrance of the community, and Chiang drove away from my sight in a blink of an eye. Zhujian followed behind me and slowly walked into the tall building. Opening the door and looking at everything familiar in the room, I began to feel suffocated in my chest for some reason. The familiar air breath reminded me of all the things that had happened in this room before. Ling and I were laughing and playing in this room, and even in every corner, we had been there sincerely. At this moment, my phone rang. I picked it up and saw that it was a message from Ling. Have you returned to Suzhou? However, I just took a glance and put my phone in my pocket. Because I deeply understand that my relationship with Ling has long come to an end, and I don't believe she loves me. A bit uncomfortable. Zhujian clearly felt that my emotions were not right, so he turned around and poured me a glass of water. And I slowly walked by the sofa and sat down, lighting a cigarette. This house was originally my and Ling's wedding home. If nothing unexpected happens, we will get married on May 1st this year. So what? Zhujian leaned against the table next to me, placed a glass of water there, and watched me speak word by word. Jiang Zhan, what exactly are you thinking? I know these words must have hurt the woman in front of me. I looked up at her, silently pushed open the door, and walked out. Suzhou's style today is fragrant and sweet, and the moat at night has become even rarer. I sat on the steps, bored by the wind, listening to a passing couple recounting their love for each other. I heard the sound of high heels behind me, turned my head and saw Zhujian walking over with a few bottles of beer. He sat next to me and handed me a bottle. Jiang Zhan, there's something I want to tell you. I've been wanting everything since I was young, but now I'm telling you very clearly that I'm missing you. In an instant, I felt the corners of my eyes wet. Since bankruptcy, this is the shortest, most direct, and most beautiful expression of love that I have ever heard, and it is also a sincere message that I will never forget in the years to come. Slowly holding the hand of Zhujian, perhaps a little nervous, my palms were sweating profusely. Zhujian, wait for you. I'm a bit nervous. I took out a cigarette from my pocket and took a deep breath. I turned my head and exhaled the smoke elsewhere, then took a hard sip of beer, finally feeling a little calm in my heart. Taking a long breath, I turned my head to look at Zhujian and spoke. When I was a child, I watched a TV drama called The Legend of Sword and Fairy. I remember there was a plot where the female protagonist asked the male protagonist to leave, but the male protagonist still stubbornly followed and insisted on helping her. I vividly remember when I scolded the male protagonist more than once, and they didn't want you anymore. Why did you still stubbornly refuse to leave? Zhujian listens carefully again. I looked at her seriously and tried to calm my tone as much as possible. What I mean is, I am willing to be the protagonist in your book. No matter how hard you drive me away or make me leave, I will stay by your side and be a knight protecting the princess. A bright smile appeared on Zhujian's face, and she looked at me charming, making me impulsive again at the edge of the moat in the dark. I forcefully pushed her down and kissed her lips. In that moment, Zhujian seemed to be scared by me as well. Her hands kept pushing and shoving me, but with my strong embrace, her movements began to decrease. I greedily sucked in the sweetness at the corner of her mouth, only to let go of her when she deliberately didn't come up. But our hands were tightly held together. Zhujian gently lay in my arms, one hand constantly drawing something in the air, but in the end, it landed on my face. When I was 5 years old, my mother was gone. My father was obsessed with work, less than taking care of me. My childhood was all lonely. Later, he appeared. I know, she still can't forget him. However, Jiang Zhan, in the years to come, my life and everything will only be with you. Do you know that since you helped me in the service area, Jiang Zhan has really been like a knight defending princesses in ancient Western times? I hugged the beauty in my arms tightly, and at this moment, I felt like I was back in my youth. In an instant, I thought a lot more. I thought of my future child, Zhujian, and I. We will have a big wedding in the future, and we will have a strange daughter who is an elf. What name should I marry? I am conflicted, but there must be no surprise that we will be happy together. Jiang Zhan, can you play me another piece of music played in Kunming? I didn't bring sun with me. I brought it. I saw Zhujian pull out my sun from his pocket like a magician. When will you? I secretly pretended it when I was in Kunming. Blow it up, I want to listen. Watching Zhujian holding his cheek and looking at me, I gently blew the sun. The ethereal and quiet voice echoed by the moat. Chapter 10. Be happy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lying in bed at night, I habitually take out my phone and browse my social media. Accidentally, I stumbled upon Qi Yangfa's WeChat moments a few days ago, which mainly featured wedding photos of him and his wife. I took a closer look at the girl, who looked very nice, but I always had a feeling that the bride looked very much like Ling. At least the eyebrows and eyes look very similar, I replied under the comment. Brother, you must be happy. Then I lit another cigarette and listened to the sound of water flowing from Zhujian while taking a shower. I held the cigarette in my mouth and called Qi Yang. Hello, younger siblings, I've looked at it and it looks great. Where will the wedding be held tomorrow? Hurry up and send me a seat. Qi Yang on the other end of the phone cursed. Your uncle, call me sister. In law. Then he fell silent and remained silent. See, what are you doing? Post the position. I can't accept him giving me this whole one. Are you coming tomorrow with the girl you came with? For a long time, Qi Yangkai spoke softly. Nonsense. Sujian is now my partner, I definitely bring it. I can't understand Qi Yang's brain circuit, I always feel like he suddenly becomes strange. I suggest you don't bring it, tomorrow. Ling Ku will also come tomorrow. I finally understand why he acted very strange when picking me up today. It turned out that he was afraid that something unexpected would happen to Ling Ku when I brought Sujian to his wedding tomorrow. Your grandfather, Chiang. Is Ling Ku your brother or I your brother? Is it wrong for your brother to bring his girlfriend to your wedding? If you say that, I won't go tomorrow. I got up and drank a glass of water, cursing angrily at the phone. I didn't mean that, I was worried. Oh, forget it, you can handle it yourself. If something unexpected happens tomorrow, don't say my buddy didn't remind you. As the phone hung up, I had already finished smoking a cigarette in my hand. Still unsatisfied, I lit another one again, smoke swirling above my head. I don't seem to have fully considered it. If I meet Ling Ku tomorrow, how should I tell the person around me, Sujian? Although they have seen each other before, it's probably difficult for either of them to solve such a situation when it's really presented to them. I was just thinking that Sujian came in wearing pajamas and immediately lay in my arms. I heard it all. I was about to say something, but Sujian spoke up step by step. I caressed her long hair and spoke apologetically. I'm sorry, I didn't think it was that comprehensive. It's okay, I'll be with you. Upon hearing my lover's answer like this, I already have an answer in my heart. I will bring Sujian with me. At the wedding, no matter what happens, I will bear it with her. But just in case, I still sent a message to Ling Ku. Tomorrow I will attend Chiang's wedding with my girlfriend. 10 minutes later, Ling Ku replied. The girl I saw in Kunming. That's right. Great. Put down my phone, I take a long breath. Tonight, I decided to go to sleep alone because I personally don't think Sujian and I have reached that point yet. Just before going to bed, I kissed her fiercely again for 10 minutes, causing the beauty to gasp for breath. The next morning at 9 o'clock, Sujian and I woke up and tidied up. I took out my most appropriate clothes, and Sujian also wore a beautiful white dress. When my brother was at his best, I would like to send him my sincerest wishes. It was almost noon when I saw the appearance of Qi Yang and the bride, and by their side, following Ling Ku as the bridesmaid. I didn't expect Ling Ku to be the bridesmaid. Seeing her chatting and laughing with the bride in the distance, I was a bit confused for an instant. She is very beautiful today, and the white bridesmaid outfit suits Ling Ku very well. However, what confuses me is that Ling Ku usually likes black clothes, which is the only white dress she has ever seen. But what makes me even more puzzled is that Ling Ku and Qi Yang's wife know each other. How could I not know? I suddenly felt a bit unfamiliar, whether it was Qi Yang, Ling Ku, or the wife he was about to spend his entire life with. Yes, I didn't know his wife at first. But I feel like I've never really understood what's wrong. Sujian clearly noticed my change, turned his head, and asked me softly. I shook my head, indicating that I was okay. But Sujian handed me a cigarette and placed it on my mouth. Take one, it will make you feel better. Ling Ku, who was approaching, seemed to notice our side and said something to the bride. The bride glanced at me and nodded with a smile. Ling Ku left the team and slowly walked up to me. So, I, Sujian, and Ling Ku stood together with an extremely strange behavior. Ling Ku is also very beautiful today, without the previous pathological state. After smiling at me, she politely said to Sujian. Hello. My name is Ling Ku. Left Jian calmly replied. Hello, Zhujian. Then there was a silence among the three. Do the bride know you? But at this moment, I was surprised not to notice the difference between the two of them, and directly asked. Didn't Yang tell you? The bride is my cousin. Ling could directly explain the reason. No wonder they look a bit like her. But I remained silent. Yang did not tell me. Ling Ku smiled and calmly glanced at me, then turned her head to the left and slowly spoke to me. Jiang Zhan, it seems that you will soon forget some things between us. Ling Ku, I don't want to discuss anything about the past with you, and you know that it doesn't mean anything to you or me. At this moment, Ling Ku ignored me and spoke to Zhujian alone. Miss Zhujian, may I have a private chat with you? Zhujian turned his head to look at me, then nodded at Ling Ku. At this moment, Yang happened to call out to me. Before leaving, I glanced at Zhujian, who nodded at me and held my hand, indicating that I was at ease. So I followed Yang to the main hall and sat there listening to him constantly recounting their sweet love stories. I was also genuinely happy for him. I want to thank my brother Jiang Zhan here. Without him and his girlfriend Ling Ku, I wouldn't have known my beloved wife. I sat below frowning, a bit puzzled. My girlfriend is now Zhujian. What's up with Chiang, this grandson? Not long after, I unexpectedly saw Ling Ku come back alone, slowly sitting next to me. And Zhujian didn't actually come back with her. Where's Zhujian? A hint of unease suddenly surged in my heart, but I still calmly asked Ling Ku. Let's go. I stared at her with wide eyes, as if thinking of something. Then I looked at Yang, who was giving a speech on the high platform, and quickly ran out of the hall. After searching around, I still couldn't find left Jian. And when I called Zhujian, I realized that the phone had been blocked. I only realized through WeChat that it was also blocked. I suddenly had an ominous premonition in my heart. I quickly took a car back to my residence and knocked open the door. In an instant, I sat on the sofa dejected because everything about Zhujian in the entire house had disappeared. I sat on the sofa, feeling disheartened and lost, muttering to myself incessantly.